right. Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Capital Factories and Austin Startup Week, our space track. I just want to welcome you here. I'm super excited for today and what we're about to go through. We're going to have 3 sessions throughout our space track today, as well as networking to get to know other attendees. So really neat. If you haven't really looked in the instructions on how to do the networking, we'll definitely help guide you today for that. And today, also, I just want to remind everybody that not only are we having these great panel sessions and these networking sessions, but we're also going to end the day with a live space happy hour at Central Machine Works at 5 p.m. here in Austin, Texas. So if you're local and you're watching, feel free to be part of our sessions online, but make sure to make a little time to drive out to Central Machine Works and have a great drink and another live networking, opportunity for you. So you definitely don't want to miss this one. We had some live networking yesterday and some of the other tracks went super great, had lots of fun. So really hope to see you all there. But anyways, before we get started with our space track, let me just take a minute to introduce myself and why I'm excited about this track. So I'm Jorge Manresa. I'm the Vice President for Federal and Defense Ventures here at Capital Factory. And one thing that I'm really excited about is how we're bringing the space community into not only federal and defense innovation, but bringing the space community and expanding that writ large across the state of Texas, and what that is happening and what is that is doing and affecting the rest of our economy. So really starting the space economy through our venture and through our founders and different startup entrepreneurs and just great thinkers that we have in universities are really producing a great momentum here in the state of Texas. So what I do day to day, again, I'm VP for the Federal and Defense Ventures here at Capital Factory. And not only are we looking for dual use capability in the federal and defense side, we're also looking for dual use ideas and commercial ideas that can transition not only from what's happening here in the commercial sector, but can transfer to the federal government and can transfer over to NASA, or other space-bearing entities that we have across the growing space commercial industry. So really exciting time here at Capital Factory, and what we are trying to do to really build gravity around the space community and really bring some density into the space commercialization movement that we have happening here in Texas and across the country. But just wanted to stop there because this is not my party today. Today, I want to just go ahead and thank Amazon Web Services, our sponsor for this space track this week at Austin Startup Week. And I would love to bring up our sponsor, Julian, who leads up as National Security and Space Lead, the AWS Public Venture and Startup. So welcome, Rich. I'm so glad to have you here this morning. How are you doing, sir?
Doing well. All right. Glad to be here. I think this is another fantastic event. This is my 5th Austin Startup Week, so always happy to do this. So I want to thank not only the Capital Factory folks, but the folks from Austin Startup Week for allowing AWS to participate in this again. So very much welcome to this. And we at AWS are thrilled to sponsor this event. And we continue to recognize that Austin is a home to a vibrant startup ecosystem. Working here has been really valuable for us, so much so that I moved down to Austin to join the community on a full-time basis. So folks always ask me, why is a huge company like AWS sponsoring a startup week? It seems kind of unusual for it. Well, we believe in startups. They have been a key part of the growth of AWS since we first started. It's sometimes hard to remember that as big as AWS is, we only started in 2006 with the launch of our first product. But rolling out cloud really changed the game for being a startup. You didn't have to buy, own, or maintain equipment and it eats up your resources. You can just acquire compute, storage, and other services as you need them. It's like turning on the light. You just expect electricity to be there. We think that cloud allows infrastructure to come like that. You can stop guessing at the capacity you need. Stop figuring out how many servers do I need. Instead, you use them as you need them, turn them on, turn them off as you get it. But most importantly, and this is where working with somebody like Capital Factory has been great for us, it frees a startup to focus on what they do. What do they bring to the table? That's their business. That's their ideas. You can focus on your secret sauce and not worry about all the incidentals that really have huge impact. But if you can focus more on your business, you can get to success faster.
That's right.
So, we engage with startups of all sizes and all types across every stage, from early stage where I just have an idea all the way to people who are raising their 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th round of funding to try to grow and scale. They've become household names by this point. We work with those companies emerging from educational institutions, including the Texas community colleges and the universities here in Texas. And we're going to have a great panel later on and talk a little bit more about working with the UT system and some of the great stuff that's happening here. And we're industry agnostic. We work with everything from nonprofits to huge corporate entities. But the reality is startups represent the next generation. That's why we care about startups. The next companies that are our great growing partners, the next Deloitte, the next Palantirs, the next Airbnb is out there somewhere. So how do we find those great companies? How do we bring them in? How do we encourage them? How do we create that community that will help them grow? We bring to bear the power of AWS to help you, whether you need business, technical, or financial support. We work with organizations like Capital Factory and other incubators, accelerators, and local investors who are focused on their ecosystems to help them grow and scale what's going on. We have an unbelievable partner community of thousands of companies that can help you in pretty much any area you might want to plug into. And from a Texas perspective, we're engaged across Texas, not just in Austin, but across all of Texas. In fact, we have over 7,000 Amazon employees here in Austin and over 70,000 across the state. So we're a large player here. We believe in Texas and we've committed to participating here. But of course, I can't introduce Austin Startup Week without giving some advice to startup founders. To be part of the role that I serve in, you have to have been a founder, because you can't work with startups unless you've been there. You can't understand the challenges they go through unless you've been through them too. And I will admit, I've been a successful founder and I've been a not so successful founder. And the difference between the two is pure blind luck. So, never count yourself out. When it comes to getting started in the startup world, people are often daunted by all the challenges and to go out there, whether it comes to raising funding or finding customers or growing your staff or doing anything. So here's some basic advice. Don't give up. Keep trying, keep taking a swing, keep taking a bite at the apple. There's gonna be something there for you. Investment is cyclic. If you can't get funding today, don't give up. Keep pushing forward. You're going to have a chance. Investment and growth in the entrepreneurial system is driven by good ideas from good people. You have good ideas, believe in them, drive it forward. Connect, network, and collaborate. This event you're doing today is a perfect example of that. There is power in numbers. Learn from others. Share what you have learned. And as the ecosystem grows, as Austin gets bigger, more and more investors start showing up to invest in these companies. Right. So share what you learn with your partners in crime that are out there also with great ideas. And you never know. You might find the partner that together you create the next blow up company that becomes a unicorn. Find the right partners to help you grow. AWS is committed to working with partners. Capital Factory here in Austin is committed to working with startups and helping you grow and scale. Find those partners and embrace them. Finally, if I can leave kind of one last observation before we move on here, Jorge, learn from the success of Amazon and AWS. Our guiding principle is customer obsession. If you focus on the customer and work backwards from there to what you're doing, it will never steer you wrong. That is the best way to ensure you're going to have business success. It's not about your technology. It's about the customers that can apply your technology or capability. That's the focus area you should have. So with that, I kind of want to wrap up this kind of my jump in intro and say, I'm looking forward to 1 or 2 unicorns coming out of the people here today. I think that would be fantastic and it would make my career capped off.
No, I love that, Rich. I mean, and thank you for sharing all that great inside information on what AWS can bring. I know it can bring a lot of resources and everything to the space commercialization movement, but more exciting is the fact, like you're saying, how do we get our founders, our startups, our entrepreneurs to really become seeded to be the next big unicorn that we're looking for, right? It's just so exciting to know how, the various networks at AWS and Capital Factory, and, with the play that I do with the federal government and maybe even NASA or SpaceX, how all these folks can really come together to lift up the capabilities of our startups that are really interested in space commercialization. So I'm really excited about what's about to happen here today. The serendipitous connections. I mean, Rich, you're absolutely spot on. The serendipitous connections are not only going to happen during our networking sessions online, but also our networking sessions this afternoon. So I urge you all to not be afraid to collaborate, to get to know people, because it's in those relationships and connections and collaboration where we're going to move humanity forward in space. So super excited about all that. Well, I know we have some really great ladies coming up here in Women in Space in just a few moments. So I'm super excited about this next session coming up. But before we really introduce these next three great ladies doing some pioneering work in the aerospace industry, let's take a look at a video from our sponsor at AWS, and then we'll come in right in with our moderator, Ms. Zaruto, who will be moderating these three great ladies that you cannot miss. I'm telling you, this is going to be an exciting panel coming up. And what the women in space are doing right now in our nation, our founders, our women founders, is just remarkable. So over to you. Let's check out this quick video from our sponsor.
He's chasing him, could get him in 2 laps.
How can you know that?
It's going to be less busy at the front of the train.
How can you tell? It's not here yet. How did you get that money? I'm so hungry.
The food's already here.
Huh? How did you know that?
Let's get some hotcakes and, the menu suggests a cinnamon roll with your meal.
How do they know what people like? How do windmills power people's houses? How are we watching this live?
Caution, objects on the road ahead.
How did it know that?
We made it.
Wow, how did you find out about this place?
All right. Hope you enjoyed that video from Amazon Web Services, where I am happily part of that team as a global alliance leader with one of our most strategic partners. I am thrilled to be with you guys here today because we have a super interesting panel and really an exceptional opportunity to talk to founders in the space industry who have vibrant and really extraordinary careers. And you'll get to hear more about that directly from them in just a moment. But I'm Lygia Zaruto. I will be the moderator for our panel today, even telling some of my own stories about women breaking glass in the Department of Defense in the U.S. Army. And I offer you today our two panelists. We have Sassy Duggleby, who's here with us today. You hear Sassy?
There we are. Now I'm here.
Beautiful, there you are. And Laura Crabtree. And I'll let both of these ladies introduce themselves and tell their stories quickly before we get to our panel questions. So Sassy, if you don't mind letting our audience know who you are and just a little bit about truly your extraordinary background.
Sure. Yeah. So again, Sassy Duggleby, that's not my real name. It's really Sarah. I named myself when I was 2 and it stuck. But I am the CEO of Venus Aerospace and my husband and I are the founders of it. He's the PhD rocket scientist. I'm the engineer with an MBA and we are building a space plane that enables 1-hour global travel. So take off in Los Angeles and land an hour later in Tokyo. And so we're commercializing some key technologies that have been coming down the pipes, for years, and raised about 13 million in venture capital funding starting in January and have about 26 employees and we're based in Houston, Texas. So we're on a long journey, but it's been absolutely incredible.
Awesome. And Laura, if you wouldn't mind doing the same, just so the audience can know a little more.
Yeah. Pleasure to be here. I am Laura Crabtree. I am the CEO and co-founder of Epsilon 3. I started Epsilon 3 after about 15 years in spacecraft operations. I worked at Northrop Grumman for 5 years and then transitioned to SpaceX, where I was for about 11 years. So I guess that would make it 16. I worked in operations there and saw how basically you would take an operation and make it digital and get everybody off the console so that you could really do more with a very small number of people. And I am working at Epsilon 3 to make that digitization of operations for the rest of the space community.
Just
and I'll actually say we actually use Laura's software Epsilon 3 at Venus for our operations management. So, and just a quick thing from my background, previous to starting Venus Aerospace, we were with Virgin Orbit in Long Beach, launching rockets off the wing of 747s. So I also have some aerospace background there.
It's just incredible. It really is. So I hope the audience is enjoying at least hearing about what these founders are bringing to the market and really changing the way humans live on Earth. The purpose of this panel today, aptly titled Women in Space, is also about educating everyone on, what it takes to get women to space. Everything from attracting women into this vertical, and I think more importantly, retaining women in this vertical. So over the next 45 minutes, we're going to talk about what really is a simple topic that has some complex themes around it once you start talking about life and, just space in general, and how it's sometimes a really difficult place to survive. So let me ask the first question, and Laura, perhaps you can answer here first for us. Sure. I'd like to know, what inspired you to get into the space industry? This is something you've been at for a long time.
Yeah.
Do you mind, talking us through what your rationale was, and was it always something that you aimed to be involved with?
Yeah, I mean, I think at an early age, my parents were very encouraging of anything I wanted to do. Neither of my parents are engineers. And I think when I told my dad I wanted to be an engineer, he was not totally surprised. He's a lawyer, but really is a math and science person at heart. And I just loved watching the shuttle launches as a kid. I know you've heard that story a million times. But I took it so far as when I was a junior in high school, I actually went to space camp. And as you probably know, most people go to space camp when they're 9 and 10, and I went when I was 15 and 16. So that was a little bit different experience for me because I was really shaping what I wanted to do. And then when I was going to apply to colleges, I thought to myself, what's the hardest thing I can think of that actually gets me toward what I wanted to do, which is work in the space industry. And obviously aerospace and astronautics was what I went with.
And Sassy, from your perspective, were you all knowing about what you wanted to do at such a young age?
I absolutely opposite of Laura.
Yeah.
I knew I liked math and science, and I actually, it was in high school that I grew up in Plano, which is a suburb of Dallas, and somebody from University of North Texas came to our high school and showed a video. It was my physics class on what's an engineer. And I was like, oh, I like math and science. I could do engineering. And so that's actually what inspired me to go into engineering. But I actually went biomedical engineering with the intent to go to med school, and decided, long story short, but decided not to go to med school and started my career with National Instruments as a test engineer. And my career has been, I've worked in test engineering, I've worked in fiber optic test, I've worked in a biotech startup, I've worked in steel manufacturing, and then ended up joining Virgin Orbit. So my career, I never ever dreamed of getting into aerospace, but I happen to be married to a husband that is a huge space nerd, and had that opportunity because of skill sets that I learned at National Instruments, my first career. That got me into Virgin Orbit, into aerospace, and I spent years learning all about the aerospace industry and fell in love with it. So totally different path, but still, and thankfully I too had parents that encouraged me, that said you could do whatever you want, just dream big.
Yeah, I think what both of you have illustrated, even with different thought processes, is how important the support network is, whether it's coming from young ages, it's a mentor, a coach, a teacher, a parent, or as you move into your career, peers or supervisors that are sort of pushing you along and supporting you in your goals. That's going to lead me to my next two questions, which are, you ladies are accomplished. You've been at this a while. You have some war stories, if you will, and scar tissue, probably.
Probably.
Yeah. And what I'm interested in knowing is, if you just had to make a generalization about mentorship and coaching and, just the space community, recognizing that's a general term, but the space community at large, how welcoming was it to you when you first broke in? Sassy, do you have?
I feel like everybody was really welcoming. They're great people in the space community. I can say I did not have a lot of mentors older than myself. At one point at Virgin Orbit, I think I was the oldest female engineer that was doing I was writing launch software code. And so that was frustrating. But then the minute an older woman came in, I immediately went to her. I was like, hey, can we chat? And can you help me? Like, can we talk about how to do life as both an engineer and a mom and a female and in a pretty male dominated industry? And I still have monthly calls with her. She's that fantastic.
That's awesome.
In terms of the industry, they're, I think, super welcoming.
Yeah, I had a similar experience. The industry was extremely welcoming to me, and kind of similar to Sassy. I didn't have any mentors. It was a lot of kind of figure it out as you go. So there was just a little bit of scrappiness involved in making sure that I was making the right decisions for myself and my family. And if there were mentors, they were not usually female. And so that didn't really help me. So that's why I'm trying to help the future generations.
So in preparing for this panel today, I listened to a variety of podcasts, and one of the podcasts focused on a book that's recently been published by a Yale professor named Betty Ann Keplis. The title of the book is Almost Heaven. And while I haven't read the book itself, just listening to the excerpts of it, this professor used a lot of evidence-based research to sort of chronicle women in space. And this was centrally focused on astronauts. And I think for a lot of humanity that is not working in the space realm, that's what they think of first. They think of women in space, you must be talking about astronauts. And the figure that was presented in the book is that around 24% of today's astronaut community are female. And so I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on how you attract more women into sort of the tip of the spear of the space community, into space exploration and into space travel? Where is the industry doing really well with that? And where do you think, again, just in your observations, whether it's as a founder or your walk through the companies that you've been with, that this environment could be more inviting to women and push women into that sort of work role?
I can start us off. So I feel like it's really a hot topic to get women into the space industry. But as you alluded to earlier, it's about keeping women into the space industry. So once, the school system has been deemed very supportive. I mean, I've talked to school children, I've talked to people about getting involved and about following their passions. But once you get women into the space industry, they don't always stay there. And I think there's a couple of different reasons for that. I've found that, it's really hard to transition from being single to being married and then to being a mother. And I will tell you, and maybe this sounds silly, but being a mom feels different than being a dad in the industry. Dads aren't encouraged to take all of their paternity leave. If they do, they take 2-3 weeks. Women, as you know, take 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, more if they're lucky. And the disparity really hurts women, because when you come back from that, there's almost a little bit of animosity because you've been gone, and nobody really understands that, because the industry is either older generation or very young. And so something in the middle, when you're starting a family, it's this thing that's not understood completely and not completely supported. Sorry.
Yeah, I would absolutely echo what Laura said. I've seen the exact same thing. So we have a plethora of young female technical or engineers and people in the space industry. And then you get into the 30s and they kind of dwindle away to other industries or to not the high pace, high stakes environments. And then they don't always come back. And so I think that's a challenge. And the other thing, sometimes culturally things happen. I mean, I would see 7 p.m. Friday night meetings. Well, I cannot work at 7 p.m. on a Friday night. I owe my children more than that. So culturally within the industry, I think things need to change. And I know that's one of the things we're passionate about at Venus is doing it different in terms of when our meeting hours are, when people have to work, how can you handle remote work? I think there's things that COVID has helped change also, but there's still a long way to go.
So you two founders have waded into, a topic that really can't be ignored. And why we bring up being mothers, and I'm a mother too of 3 children.
Amazing.
Different family schedules, different activities that they're each involved in. But it's not just the parents, the dynamic. I think anybody who finds themselves moving into that role of a caregiver, whether it's a feeling parent or perhaps it's your spouse or partner, whatever the situation is, I think the crux of our point right now is that there are some life responsibilities that, through the course of a human life really start to sort of labor your decision-making process on how do you balance it all. And I don't think balance is a really great word. Maybe a better word is how do you manage?
Yeah.
And still not lose sight of your career aims and your visionary goals you want to do. And I do think that this topic, what we're discussing, really does present more of a challenge for women and even a barrier to retention and a barrier to, dare I say, ascending in whatever it is that you've chosen as your profession. I think that's about right.
It does. And, for people that don't understand, either young engineers or women who don't have the desire to have children, which are all fair things, it is very hard to explain, okay, I'm going to leave for X amount of time. And here are my hard cutoffs because I have to pick up my children. But if you need me to be available at 8 p.m., I'm going to still work at 8 p.m. because I did that for years. I would wake up at 5 and work out, then work, then take care of my kids, then go to work, then pick up my kids, then work. So it's a constant cycle. And just because I'm not there doesn't mean I'm not working extremely hard.
Yeah, I think there are probably a lot of people who either are watching this live or will see this in a recording and resonate with what you just said. I can think of a cohort of women and men that really have to just wrestle with this. And it's a grudge match. And you just have to pick and choose, I think, where you're going to apply your energy at a given time. And I do think it's amazing that you two have found a way to do it all really, really well. Because you are both engineers and you have technical acumen, and in a lot of ways, that's instant bona fides and credibility in this vertical. What would you say to women who maybe don't come from a STEM background, but very much want to be part of the aerospace and defense community or the space travel community? Is there a place for them? Where do you think it's at?
Well, absolutely. I mean, while it's space, all the business operations, accounting, marketing, I mean, all of the standard operations that happen in any business, whether you're selling shampoo for Johnson & Johnson or you're selling rocket satellite rides on a rocket, all the industry needs all types of people. And so you do not have to be technical. And I think people don't realize, oh, I could go, do marketing for a space company or do technical writing, or there's a variety of areas, accounting, accounts payable, finance.
I mean,
everything.
I've seen people in sales that don't have engineering backgrounds. I've seen people obviously doing project management more on the, planning side of things that don't have technical backgrounds. And also, some of the planners for astronaut training. So that happened while we were at SpaceX. They didn't have engineering backgrounds. So there are plenty of opportunities to get involved. I would say probably start learning what you can about the industry and find ways in which you can relate to the people that are in the industry, maybe learn some technical things about the vehicles or about what people are doing so that you can communicate, because a lot of the non-technical jobs, it's about communicating, it's about planning, like what Sassy said, it's about operations, but there are lots of opportunities.
It seems to me that the ecosystem that's required to put that person in orbit, which again, I think is what a lot of the common person thinks of space. And I think that's because of Hollywood. And I think that's just because of, cultural, societal, cultural, I guess, understanding. There's so much more behind that directly and indirectly supported that activity. And I think it's important for that story to get out. At Amazon, where I'm at, there is a huge community of personnel who are not engineers, not software developers, not working in security. They come in some other work role type, and then over time find that they literally have great interest in becoming more technical. And there are a variety of ways to upskill themselves. And it doesn't mean that everybody has to be an engineer or is breaking out code, but there are just a variety of ways to get to new end states. So in your own paths, and you both have worked for large organizations before you became founders, what sort of advice might you have for the person who's not in a quote hardcore STEM work role now, but may have interest? Is there something that those folks, in particular, those women could do to sort of carve a path in a new technical way when they started out their career with something very different?
I mean, I would say read, learn. I mean, there's so many books out there. Listen to podcasts. I mean, I'm an avid podcast listener on all sorts of different topics, and just get as familiar with the industry because it is a lingo. And then also reach out to people in the industry. I think people, women, men, whoever, if there's a role that you think you might be interested in doing, go find out more about what does that role entail? How did they get into the industry?
I would say similarly, learn, but develop a passion. This industry is very passionate. I mean, we're all extremely excited about what's happening and, if you will, drinking the Kool-Aid of space and what's possible. And we're pushing boundaries and we're making changes to an industry that is that has been around for a while, but we're commercializing it. So we're making the transition from more government to more commercial. And I think the need for passion to do that is, absolutely necessary.
You've brought up another great conversation point from my lens, which is the characteristics of a person who could be successful in what I'm going to call the space vertical, or in the space business. I also tend to think that independence and ambition and probably grit, a lot of what's required to be a founder of a startup. What do you do when you're told no or no but? What would you say, and this is going to delve a little bit into your personal stories, which I hope you'll be, transparent and share. What have been some difficulties that you've run up against? And if you don't mind, if there are some, again, that you find might be sort of unique to women that are working in the same space. So we've sort of checked, being a mother and balancing that. And for those who are listening, if you're not a mom or you're not a parent, you at least know one or you've worked with one. So I think it's seminal to sort of put that out there. What challenges have each of you come up against, and in particular ones that you think were unique to women, and how did you overcome them?
I can go first. I actually decided, I elected when we first moved to Southern California to stay at home. My kids were 3 and 6. And I was a stay-at-home mom for a couple of years, and then had the opportunity to interview. And getting back in the workforce was hard. I felt like I was carrying a burden of all women that had left their careers for a bit and wanted to come back. And so even the interview process, it was a challenge to convince the person I happened to be interviewing with was a younger male, and to convince him that just because I had taken a break and had a gap on my resume did not mean that I was not competent anymore. And so thankfully I had some other advocates for me that helped say, no, she's got the skill sets, give her a chance. And I was able to hop in and prove myself. But it was a big challenge, and even a confidence. There was some confidence that I lost because I thought, oh, I haven't done anything for a couple of years. So one of my big passions is, how do I help stay-at-home moms or women that have put their careers on hold because of young children? How do I help bring them back into an organization? And so I'm trying to pay it forward because I know how much it helped me.
I guess for me, I had a couple of different experiences that really shaped kind of how I treat women in the workforce now, because I had to overcome a few things. And for me, I had a passion for what I was doing. So some things that were said to me or I could have let affect me, I basically had to just pretend it didn't happen or pretend I didn't hear what people said, because I felt so passionate about what I was doing, and I did not want to let that affect my life and my career and my job. And I think for women that are in the workforce, you have to kind of make a decision. Are you going to let that affect you? Are you going to make a stand? And for me, at that moment, I decided to talk about it, but not make, here's the line in the sand. And in addition, for certain things, I did stand up for myself and say, this is unacceptable. There were times when people asked me to order food because I was the only woman in the room. And I said, that's not my role. I am not doing that. And I don't know, Sassy, if that's ever happened to you, but I just felt that was inappropriate to ask of me. And it was very clear that I was asked because I was the only woman. And so I thought I needed to say something that was inappropriate. And so I guess overcoming that, it's the decision to either say something about it, which in certain cases I did, or just not let it affect my day or my role and be the bigger person and move on.
I can tell you,
maybe isn't the right answer.
No, that is what you just illustrated. Of course, I don't think is limited to the space or the tech community.
Probably not, no.
Yeah. Even just in my defense experience, spending 14 years on active duty and still a reservist today, I was part of the first cohort of women to attend Ranger School, which is a very physically demanding and intellectually demanding course. It's a leadership school in the U.S. Army. And I went at the age of 39. The average age of the student there is 22. They were all male up until 2015. And I had a patch of gray hair that's expertly covered with my platinum now. A little patch of gray hair. So not only did my sort of age get exposed at this young man's school, but it, kind of got out that I had 3 kids, and I was affectionately referred to as the mom of the squad. And there was an expectation almost that I had like a nurturing role. And so instead of, getting breakfast or sandwiches or making sure that everybody had their lunch for the day, I think that nurturer role was an expectation of my peers, and they would come and talk to me about things they probably wouldn't talk to other men a lot about, So it's interesting how society and cultural norms, and even by country, it differs, how that's infused in the workforce. And I think we are living through a major change where some of the things that perhaps we have encountered may be non-existent, for the next generation of women and men who are coming through in the same way. So
yeah, definitely some cultural changes are occurring.
Yes.
In how we think about hiring, how we think about retention, how we think about how we treat everyone in the workplace. And I think that is definitely needed in a lot of different workplaces in a lot of different ways.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I've got just a couple more questions for you, literally 2, so that we'll make ourselves on time here. One is about COVID has made the environment a place where remote work is, was essential for some time. Now we're in a hybrid environment, but I think remote work has opened up the aperture for acquiring talent throughout the world. Would you agree with that as a baseline?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But to get into the space community, is there an ideal geography where folks should be? I think growing up, I was a Floridian, so Cape Canaveral and all things on the Space Coast seemed to be like a great place to go.
Yeah.
Houston, Texas doesn't seem too bad. Do you have thoughts on good geographies, where folks could physically locate to or relocate to if they wanted to make a splash into the space industry?
Yeah, I guess it depends. Depends on what part of the space industry you want to be a part of.
Mm-hmm.
There's a huge contingent in Northern California, in Seattle, in Colorado, in Texas, in Florida. There's a lot in the southern states as well. There's a huge contingent in Virginia. So really, you've got your pick of probably 10 to 20 different places. But if you want to be part of human spaceflight, there are definitely like pockets that are better to live in. If you want to be part of satellite development, there are pockets. And then, if you want to be part of the launch vehicle development or launches, there are obviously pockets of, launch sites that are available. So I guess depending on where you want to be within the ecosystem, make that decision first and then look for, the pockets of companies. Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all over the United States in different areas. I mean, and there's everything from startups. Like there are a lot of startups that have been funded recently in aerospace. So if you wanted to go work in a small scale startup, that opportunity is there, all the way up to, NASA hires, I don't even know what size they are. And they're scattered all over the United States, and then, Houston, obviously the center of human spaceflight with Johnson Space Center, and now they have the Houston Spaceport, which is actually why we relocated from Southern California, which is incredible amount of space companies. I think even in Long Beach where we were, there were like 6 or 7 just right in one little pocket. And so you kind of have your pick of a lot of different places in the United States where you could work.
There's even a couple of launch companies in New York that I've been talking to. So startups everywhere.
Yeah, so it's everywhere. It really has evolved where, I guess in prior generations, if you weren't in the Daytona, Cape Canaveral area or the Houston area, you were excluded, really, automatically, sort of by geography.
Or if you weren't willing to relocate, right?
Yeah, limited at least, right? So it appears I do have a few more minutes, which is great for our audience because there are a couple more things that I want to get through. And I guess the next question, and Sassy, you started to pick at it, and it would have been a great segue, and it's going to be my segue now. You mentioned you like to reach out to women who are coming back to the workforce, or sort of mentoring and coaching there. What are both of you doing or interested in promoting in terms of creating diversity for women? Either by work role, by experience, you name the different variation. What are each of you doing to help propel women into this community? And it could be small ways or big ways. Sometimes it's the small and discreet ways, I think, that are the most powerful.
Again, trying to hire women that were stay-at-home moms, which we have quite a few in our organization. Getting them back in the workforce. I'm actually a mentor for the ION, which is a Houston Diversity Accelerator. And then one of my big things is I've just started a group of CEOs in aerospace of women CEOs in aerospace to help connect us, because there's not very many of us. And slowly these spiders have spread out that I get connected to one and then another. And so I'm trying to create a community where we can share with one another what's going on and help lift up one another. In terms of also like raising venture capital, if you want to talk startups, not just space, it's a whole different world. Most venture capital funding goes to males. The number is incredible. I think it's 92% of all venture capital funding goes to male-led organizations. And so that's the other passion. I'm passionate about space, but also about like, how do we get venture capital in the hands of more female founders? And so I've chatted with a lot of women on, how do you raise capital? It's hard. You want to talk about grit? Like we got told no over and over and over and over again. And we just kept pressing on. So a couple different areas, but, I think mentorship is probably the biggest one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, getting women involved starts with schools, I think, starts with young children. And I take every opportunity to talk to all of the young children. I mean, I think you saw one of my children, but I have a 5 and a 7-year-old. And so all of their friends, all of the other people that I'm introduced to, I kind of bring them into my circle and talk to them about what's possible, about what they can do and how they can affect the world to make sure that they feel empowered to follow their passion. And I think going to when women are looking into getting into the workforce, really encouraging them and pushing them, because Sassy kind of touched on this a little bit, but women don't always feel, and I don't mean to make a broad general statement, but at least I, for myself, don't always feel like I can apply for a job that is sort of outside of what I perceive as my reach. And we need to encourage women to apply for whatever they want to do. If you think you can do it, you should apply for it, even if your resume doesn't meet all of the bullet points. If your resume meets 2 of the bullet points, you probably are someone they would look at. So, take that moment of self-doubt and throw it out the window and really just take the leap, because it can happen. I mean, I've looked at resumes where, there was just something about the resume, something about the person that struck me, and maybe they didn't meet all my criteria. But for me, it's about passion. It's about the ability and the desire to learn. And those things for me are the most important. So if you have those things, don't doubt yourself.
So in the realm of the conversation of diversity, inclusion, and just bringing in creativity and talent in all the ways that are out there for us, there have been some terms that have been popularized. And I do think one is underrepresented, the term underrepresented, whether it's underrepresented communities, underrepresented minorities. I had a conversation with somebody on the East Coast recently, and they used the term, and I was shocked to hear it, but I think it's true, underestimated. And as you just explained, that 92% of the founders that are going out and getting capital tend to be male. I want to know, do you think it's because women-owned firms, women-owned companies are being underestimated? And this concept of underestimation, does that exist? And how do women in particular overcome that?
I think it's twofold. I think some of it is people tend to fund who they know. And so it's a network effect. I also think women, it goes back to confidence sometimes. And again, this is also general, but I hear of a woman that says, I've kind of got this idea, I'm going to go start it, but they don't have the confidence to jump out and leap. And whereas guys are like, oh, I got this. And so, encouraging more women to take that step, I think would help the ecosystem. And I also think the network effect of if in order to reach capital, you have to know somebody that knows that world. And so if you've never been in a world where that there's venture capital out there and how to network and how to reach the VCs to get the money, it's kind of a game. And so I was fortunate and had someone kind of help me through that game, a group of women that their entire premise was, we want to get more capital into the hands of women. So they were going to train women on how to do it. And I got lucky and had that mentorship. But I think it takes continuous effort to do so.
And so we've got some audience questions coming in. And I think what you've just touched upon is a nice intro to the question, which is, how do we inspire more women to come into the space environment, in the space business? And I think I would add on to that, how do we inspire them to be confident and sort of, with authority, put forth their idea, put forth their intention, and sort of dump this imposter syndrome, another popularized word that I think really plagues a lot of women. I
think everybody always feels a little bit of imposter syndrome when they're starting something new. I've talked to plenty of women, men, every type of person feels a little bit of that. But, I would go back to people in the industry, myself included, I'm sure Sassy, are more accessible than ever. So if you're doubting yourself or if you want to reach out, just try. I can't tell you how many people I've wanted to reach out to in the past and never felt the confidence to do so. But after founding a company, I just decided that I was going to be confident in reaching out to random people cold and saying, I want to learn about what you're doing. And people are very receptive to that. And so encouraging people to really just get outside of their comfort zone, and especially women, talk to other women about what they're doing. And that's how we kind of empower the whole community.
Yeah, and I think it still keeps going back to the schools. I mean, I think at the schools, my daughters need to know that they could be a NASA engineer or an astronaut. I even saw something recently of like someone took a NASA t-shirt that was in the boys section at Target and put it in the girls section. It's like a NASA shirt is not a boys shirt. Why even with the marketing that's happening in the commercial, space, why do they target boys for rockets and astronauts? I mean, how many boys PJs have rockets and astronauts versus how many girls have unicorns and princesses? It's like, no, I want my daughters to wear rocket and astronaut PJs. So I think letting women know, and I'm going to shout out to the Brooke Asakowitz Fellowship. I think that's what it's called. And Patty Gray Smith. There's some groups out there that are really trying to bring up diversity within the aerospace industry for college and underrepresented females. And so if you are a female in those areas in college, I would absolutely encourage you to look up the Brookies and some of those other, I think Patty Gray Smith Fellowship Lord. I'm not sure if you're familiar with those.
Brooke Owens, I think is the
Brooke Owens, that's right.
Yeah.
So
good. And while we're on the topic of resources for women who are interested in this space, or just anybody really at large, we've got a question from the audience around tech and tech innovation that could be transferred into the commercial sector and learning about that tech. Precisely, the question is around the NASA innovation groups, maybe even some of the groups that you just mentioned. How can our audience learn more information about that sort of emerging technology and what ought to be transferred into the commercial sector?
I think the needs of space are vast. Vast, from living on Mars and energy systems to what's happening with satellites to propulsion, avionics. There are so many things that the space industry needs. And I think NASA and some of those groups have done a really good job of putting out like, hey, what kind of cool technology do you have that might have a space application? So I think there's definitely challenges on how do you take a cool idea and get it all the way into the marketplace where it's integrated into commercial space systems.
Yeah.
But I think the industry as a whole is really working on that, whether it's AFWorks in the DoD or some of the Space Force initiatives in DIU. And then also a bunch of NASA has SBIRs, so Small Business Innovative Research Grants are incredible ways to take really cool technology and see if there's a fit within some of the larger governmental organizations.
Yeah, I would say that and I saw there was a question on non-dilutive capital. This kind of goes back to the non-dilutive capital from the SBIRs and the STTRs. It's really important for all of those innovations to have an application, in the industry. So when NASA or any government agency puts out, a request for information or an SBIR topic, those are the needs that the different agencies see in commercialization and want to fund research in those areas. And so, I often scan the SBIR and STTR topics to see, what kinds of things are upcoming. I think those are a lot of good resources for that type of information.
While we're still on the resource topic, we've got another question from the audience around a book, or maybe not even a book, but some online resources that have been favorites for you that you would recommend that was helpful along your aerospace journey or your entrepreneurial journey? You both have managed to blend, the business leadership and management world with your finesse and expertise in engineering. So, was there a book or any online tooling that really inspired you or helped you that you could share with the audience today?
I have a book. It's not an entrepreneurial book. It's a book called Girl Code. And the book kind of details how women support other women in an entrepreneurial space. It is not a tech book, but I recommend it to all of the women out there who are listening or who want to support other women. I have come across some women who have not been supportive of other women. I find that there's two types of women, and they talk about this in the book. There's women who want other women to succeed and genuinely just support people. And then there are women that see other women as kind of their adversary. And I strive to be the kind of woman who supports other women and people in general. I don't want to be the other one. So, yeah, it's a great book.
The book that comes to mind similar to that, Moment of Lift by Melinda Gates, talks about how by lifting up women across the world, you lift up the entire world. And it's one of my very favorites. Again, also not entrepreneurial aerospace. In terms of entrepreneurial stuff, I'm a huge advocate of podcasts. Everything from how I built this to acquired to invest like the best. There is so much information out there on how to do startups and how to raise capital. And I mean, there's probably more. It's overwhelming at times, but I love to pop a podcast in when I'm driving and I've got 20 minutes to go somewhere, and you just can pick up a lot of learning in that short little time frame.
Yeah, and there is a decent amount of lingo with venture capitalist money and starting a company. So learning the lingo is really important. And like Sassy said, I listen to podcasts as well.
It's almost like when you travel to a foreign country, you want to be able to interact with the natives. And so, I think that is an important point that you raise, because again, for those in the audience that don't come from a STEM or a technical background and you see a brick wall in front of you, I'm not an engineer, I don't belong here. I think what Sassy and Laura have illustrated for all of us is that, one, that's simply not true. But then also this pro tip that one of the best ways to navigate through the community is, mastering this lexicon. And I think that will help anyone to be more comfortable in the space. Yeah. We've got just a few minutes left, and this is my final question. And I'm sorry for that, because I think the audience is probably really delighting in hearing you and your transparency and your genuine commitment to this conversation. But if we were to discuss this 5 years from now, if the three of us got together and our children are older and some maybe even heading into high school and college, what does this conversation look like about women in space? How would you like to see it go 5 years from now? And let me tell you where my head's at.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many ways you can go with this.
We're still at the tip of the iceberg, I feel, in terms of women penetrating this space, so that there's not only one or two of us in a room, whether it's a boardroom or a mission room. How do you want the conversation to look 5 years from now? Are we still at the tip of the iceberg trying to justify why women should be in the environment and still having this conversation about not feeling like an imposter? Or have we made some progress? In 5 years, what do you think that looks like?
I hope in 5 years we don't have this conversation, because there are so many women involved. I know that maybe is a strange answer, but at the place where we don't need to talk about how many women are involved or how to get more women involved, because there are equal parts women and other diverse groups trying to get into the industry and succeeding at the point where it's not unusual to find women in leadership positions or as a CEO of a company or founding startups. That's the place I hope to be in. And I think 5 years will make some progress, but probably won't be all the way there. So maybe 10 years we'll be all the way there, hopefully.
Yeah, that was I hope that 5 years is enough. I don't know that it is. I think it's a slow changing industry, unfortunately. And I think it's just going to take time, but with the continued success of, people flying into space and space tourism and the excitement that is happening in the industry, I think it's only going to propel more women to want to join. And I hope that continues to change. And if we can continue to lift up the younger generation into the next spot of leadership within organizations and create diverse management in an organization and continue to have high-level CEOs and startups, I think the story just will continue to build. And there's hope. There's hope for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And, I will say, to the two of you, just your position in leadership, the success that you're having with Venus and with Epsilon 3, you probably didn't know that you were going to wear that responsibility of mentor and, aspirational advisor, yet here you are. So I really want to say thank you to you both, Sassy and Laura. Your stories are extraordinary. I know that you're both accessible on LinkedIn if folks in the audience are interested in keeping up with these founders and their companies. You're doing amazing good for humanity. And it was very exciting to talk to you today. I hope you enjoyed the panel as much as I did. And with that, we're going to conclude our portion, and I'll turn it back over to Rich Julian and to Jorge Manresa. Thank you so much for your time, ladies.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
All right, that was awesome. I mean, Rich, just like Halcya said, she did a great job moderating. But she's like, these women doing some wonderful things over at Venus Aerospace and Epsilon, really moving humanity forward. Now, I'm glad that she used the term humanity because when we talk about women in space, it's not just about women advancing some technology. It's about women advancing humanity's ability to really capture space and the human imagination of what that frontier can do for all of mankind, right? So I really love that. This was such a great panel, man, and it's so glad that you guys are sponsoring this type of stuff, because I know here at Capital Factory, we're really, really excited about what Women in Space are doing. And for those who have been listening, who listen to this Women in Space, and those ladies out there that are maybe even thinking about going into space, starting a company, or they're founders right now, wherever you're tuning in from, know that you've got an ally in Capital Factory, and these great women, Halcya, Sassy, Laura, from those companies are there to not only help mentor, but also guide and coach perhaps, what you can do to help contribute to this great movement going on, not just for women in space, but for humanity in space. So Rich, any thoughts?
Yeah, but that was a really fantastic panel, and I really want to thank Laura, Sassy, and Halcya for discussing a challenging topic in a very relatable way. And I will tell the people in the audience that, having been lucky enough to meet each of them, they are that impressive in real life.
They are.
I do want to throw out one thing that's going on there. So we work a lot in Clubhouse, which is a social app that's out there. There are some really fantastic panels for female founders, female entrepreneurs who are thinking about becoming founders, how to raise capital in the female industry, stuff like that there. It's been a great platform that's out there. AWS does a lot within that. It's a great piece, and I would encourage folks to go check out Clubhouse. Much like I think of it as a living podcast. So as Sassy mentioned, podcasts can be exceptional. What you can find in Clubhouse is some living podcasts that are live going on to that. And I know Capital Factory is a large participant, and AWS is all over the medium and is participating in that as well. So awesome. I'm really excited to kind of move into the next session as we go on here. We had a chance to hear some great founders and things that they're doing. But as they mentioned, perhaps nowhere is there a more vibrant or expanding market than space, right? The commercial world is embracing space and the potential to drive business that it represents. And of course, we know from our background in the national security domain that governments around the world are not only looking at for their national security needs, but for economic development and growth. One of the areas we've seen a huge amount of growth in the creation of entrepreneurs and new companies entering the market is through the university programs around the world. We, of course, are incredibly lucky to have one of the biggest universities and one of the most prestigious universities in the world here in Austin. But it's more than just University of Texas. although, hook 'em horns. Texas is home to a myriad of universities and a huge system for community colleges and other colleges around here. I know this is a key area for Capital Factory. Can you share a little bit about the breadth of engagement you guys are doing to encourage collaboration and cooperation with universities and companies emerging out from there?
Oh yeah, absolutely, man. I am so excited about this, Rich, because Capital Factory, what we're trying to do is really bring together the various universities across Texas and the companies that they can spurn really together to collaborate. So just like you're saying, we're really great partners. I mean, we love University of Texas in Austin. They're really close to us, not only in proximity, but in project and ideals. So really excited to have the Texas Rocket Engineering Lab about to, have a little time with us here. But between the Cockrell School of Engineering, the Aerospace Engineering and Engineering Mechanics School, but also University of Texas in Dallas, up University of North Texas, the UTARI down in Arlington, Texas, and even others like Texas A&M, and looking at Rice University. We're really working to kind of bring together a collaborative ecosystem to really drive technology forward. And that's really what our vision is at Capital Factory, is to bring everyone together. Just like in the military, we say something called unity of effort. We want to create unity of effort between the university systems and the university schools, especially when we're looking at high-tech technology like going into space, right? Things like rocketry that we're doing. That is really great work that we're about to hear from TREL. But then what would happen if Capital Factory, AWS, and just everybody in our ecosystem can really come together to help propel, right? And just further launch different various types of technology, from rocketry to satellites to microsat, and maybe other new industry areas that we're really not even looking into right now, because it's so new. Space is so new and so vast and so exciting. So absolutely. I mean, just from a university perspective and what students are doing, a lot of the new tech, where we're going to go with humanity here over the next 5, 10, 15 years is going to come from these students. So whatever we can do to really help lift up the entire university system, the various schools, the special groups like TREL, those are the kind of things that Capital Factory, along with our partners like AWS and others, really would like to lift up together, rise the tide, and really do great things for humanity. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I think that, the last panel talked about encouraging young entrepreneurs in more than just the STEM fields to enter the space domain. Here's a perfect example of that. Just such of a program that's doing that. Texas Rocket Engineering Lab from the University of Texas at Austin, that we've been lucky enough at AWS to work with over the last couple of years, is really encouraging them to look at not just the rocket engineering, which is in their name, but all of the things that go around that you need to put things into space. So not only is they looking at the engineering side of the house, but the business and operations piece of that. So with that, we'd really love to throw it over to the panel from the Texas Rocket Engineering Lab and Daryl Shook from AWS's Aerospace and Satellite IBU, who will moderate the panel with that.
Awesome. Hey, Daryl.
Hey, Jorge and Rich. It's an honor to be here. I come from over 30 or 32 years, hard to believe, in the space industry just down the road in Houston. I started out on the shuttle program, the space shuttle program, which was a behemoth, program that required so many dollars, and it was a big government program. It's just great to see the dynamics change here with students building a rocket that's going to go over the von Karman line over 100 kilometers. I mean, that's just an amazing development. And being part of, having been part of that legacy program known as Space Shuttle, Space Station, and seeing, things happening in a university and doing really significant things is just super exciting. I'm really happy to be part of that as a business development manager focused on space exploration. So proving out these capabilities is just awesome. So I'd like to turn it over to Adam, Greg, and Lauren of TREL, and we're ready to hear more about what you guys are about, and then ask you some questions.
Great. Well, firstly, I'd like to thank everyone for that introduction. That was amazing. And I'll go ahead and introduce myself first and then pass it on to the team. So I'm Adam Nowitz. I am one of the corporate development heads at the Texas Rocket Engineering Lab, or TREL, as we like to go by. I'm originally from Johannesburg, South Africa. hence the flag in the background. I'm a mathematics major at UT in my 3rd year, and I'm very, very excited to be here. So I'm going to pass it off to Greg to introduce himself.
Hi, my name is Gregory Gashi. I am a junior aerospace engineering major. I also work on the corporate development team in the business sector with Adam. I want to thank AWS and Capital Factory for having us here. And I'd like to pass it on to Lauren.
Hi, I'm Lauren Rodriguez. I am TREL's chief engineer. I'm from McAllen, Texas originally, and I'm a 3rd year aerospace engineering student. I'm really excited to be here, so thank you for having me.
That's great. Thanks. You know, I see you got the charts already queued up, and we'll just let you go right on into those. Go ahead, Adam.
Perfect. So we'll get right into it. So before we dive into the technicalities of the lab and our project, wow. Can we get the slides up? Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
Oops.
What?
I think we're having some technical
Yeah.
issues. Come on, Greg, it's not rocket science.
Looks like they're working on it. Get you queued up here.
Should just click. Play from the beginning, next slide.
Just doesn't seem to want to go there. I know they're working on it here.
Okay, so do you want to, we can just go like that. Perfect.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay, I apologize about the technical difficulties, but I guess we'll just get started anyway. So before we dive into the technicalities of the lab and our project, I'd like to introduce you to the mission of TREL. At TREL, we don't just build rockets, we build rocket builders. We don't only aim to be a lab that produces and launches complicated rockets, but we want to create and build the people that are capable of doing so. So that's why at TREL, we foster an environment of diversity, equity and inclusion, knowledge sharing, and community engagement. So some of our main objectives are to educate, experience, and to impact. At TREL, everything in the lab is student run, from every aspect of the rocket design, the testing, the integration, our business teams, and everything else that goes on. We're students learning about rocket technology, industry safety, quality, and the operational process. So this leads me to our next mission of experience. TREL offers its members hands-on experience through advanced projects in rocket engineering. When our members graduate from UT and TREL, they're able to take this experience with them into their professional careers. And finally, one of the most important objectives of TREL is impact. We've expanded our mission outside the 4 walls of the lab. We're actively engaging in our community through outreach projects. For example, our Rocketry 101 program that we aim to bridge the gap in STEM education for underrepresented communities, so that space is accessible for everyone, regardless of age, background, or skill set. And through these efforts, TREL's inspiring the next generation of aerospace pioneers who can solve the problems of new space. And as Rich mentioned, we're not just rocket engineers, but we take on every aspect of the entire process, whether it's business, engineering, the scheduling, and just running the lab itself. All of this is being done by our students within the lab and outside, broadening our knowledge sharing to the other communities to inspire the younger generations of aerospace pioneers. So just for context, our lab currently to date has 231 members across 24 different majors at UT within 7 colleges. And that goes back to Rich's point that he mentioned, that we're not just rocket engineers or aerospace engineers or software engineers. We at TREL, we want everyone to be a part of it and to open the eyes of space and the complexity of rocket engineering to everyone.
So now I'll get into our rocket. Our rocket that we're currently building is called Halcya. So this is a 28-foot tall rocket with a 15-inch diameter. It is looking to break the Kármán line of space as the first collegiate bipropellant liquid rocket, which is awesome. Hopefully it'll be the most advanced collegiate rocket yet. I can't even say how excited I am just to see it go into development. But the cool thing about Halcyon for us is Halcyon, the rocket itself, is awesome, but we use it at TREL as a tool to inspire the next generation of engineers. So that way, when they go out and they get into industry, they already have that hands-on experience. They've already made those mistakes that you see happen in industry, and they're learning from them before it. And Halcyon right now is just our current tool to establish the University of Texas and TREL as a established aerospace lab, as we were founded in 2018, and we're already on to this. I just can't say how excited I am for the development of TREL and the future projects we're holding. That being said, we're going to talk a little bit about what we've done so far.
Yeah, so like Greg mentioned, we have a pretty big vehicle by collegiate standards that we're working on here. So Halcyon is about 28 feet tall and 15 inches in diameter, which is pretty big. And this is because of what it takes to hit the Kármán line. Halcyon's technologies are pretty up to par with what the industry standard-based technologies are. And what this means for us is that when we're going to find relevant mentors to work with or get our designs checked by, we're often presenting a lot of components that they are building similar ones at their companies. As advanced engineers with degrees and master's degrees that we don't have yet. We're kind of learning this all as we go at a very young age, which I think makes TREL and labs like TREL incredibly special. So some of those technologies are, for instance, our engine, our Havoc TXE2 engine. This is where I kind of found my roots in TREL. This is where I started in engineering in the lab. I was propulsion lead prior to this role. So Havoc is a 3,500 pound force RP1 and liquid oxygen engine. It's regeneratively cooled, and all of that was designed in-house by our engineers. And most importantly, it features an additively manufactured chamber that we're getting made with a partner of ours, EOS, and a graphite nozzle extension. I'll talk more about where Havoc is actually at in its development right now. I'm really excited about it. Next is our software platform. We have 4 distributed computers. 2 of them are at the top of the rocket in what we call our nose cone pressure inner tank, and then 2 of them are at the bottom of the rocket in the engine bay. So that area in that left image, you can see kind of where the fins are, just above that engine mount. Those 4 computers are all connected and have to be communicating with each other flawlessly throughout the course of flight. The way we communicate with the rocket is with our long-range communication system that kind of lets us command it and control it and make sure that we're able to not only reach our goals, but be safe in doing so. Finally, our software platform is an integrated platform that features our flight software, our hardware in the loop software, which we'll also be doing testing through thanks to NI, who graciously donated a lot of hardware to us, and then our mission control platform. Finally, the vehicle structure. I talked a little bit about the size of it, but we are a fully composite airframe. We have carbon fiber skirts and couplers between our main structures, which are our tanks. Those are composite overwrap pressure vessels. We are a pressure-fed engine, so we have helium as well as liquid oxygen and RP. Finally, to get us around those tanks so that we don't have to be routing any fluid lines through them or electronics, we have 2 raceways to house all of our electronic and fluid assemblies. Lastly, for control, we have 3 actuated fins, and for upper atmosphere, we do have 2 sets of RCS nozzles. So some of where we are currently at, near the end of the spring semester, we got to our first TXE1 hot fire. So TXE1 is not the same engine as Havoc that I talked about. It's actually a testbed engine that we used as developing engineers to, 1, validate that we can properly manufacture, assemble, and hot fire an engine, and 2, to build up an arsenal of kind of design tools that we can apply to not only Havoc, but future engines. TXE2 is a 2,500 pound force, also locks an RP engine. And we've since had 4 total hot fires of this engine, bringing us up to our half duration. And we're looking to go into full duration and then hopefully beyond that to kind of test the limits in coming semesters. We'll also be using it to test new technologies and to help kind of inform decisions that we make, not only in our flight engine, but in things like our flight weight fluids feed system, how we deliver our propellants to that engine, and some of the sensors we'll carry on board in flight. So another huge milestone that I'm really excited about is our tank development testing. So what you see here is some footage from our RP1 tank development test, where we burst the tank. So basically, we're testing it to failure. And what's really exciting about this test here is that our predicted value matches exactly the value of pressure at which this tank burst. So that really tells us that we've succeeded in doing our analysis, and that tool that we're using is on the right track. Lastly, before we move into questions, I will talk a little bit about our timeline. So the stuff I've talked about up to this point has been summer 2021 and prior. To me, the exciting stuff is really what's coming next. So right now, what we're working on doing is, like I mentioned, getting that first chamber print off with EOS. By the end of this semester, we should have a full serial number 1 of our flight engine in our hands and ready to test. So we can begin that test campaign. And that's a huge milestone for the lab to have that engine at the gate. We'll also be receiving our flight COPVs, so we can start qualifying and testing those as well. Next will be the integrated software demo. So I mentioned that our flight software really consists of 3 primary components. All of those should be finalized to the point that we can fully integrate them, run them, and make sure it's kind of matching what we expect to see in flight. So Hill will do the job of making the whole system think it's in flight, put some realistic looking numbers into the software and see how it responds in different abort scenarios or even success scenarios. Finally, on the structure side of things, we plan to have a full airframe built. So the GIF I was showing earlier is actually some footage of the structures team and myself building one of our skirts. So the tricky thing in composites is that we are able to do it all in-house, but there are a lot of fine-tuning things to our process that we need to work through that we've been working on, and we've made immense progress over the past year alone. So once we've gotten through all of those, getting those first, I'll call them serial number 1s in our hands, spring 2022 will be systems qualification. So testing them and proving to us that they work in the way that we expect them to. We will usually test these at a little higher than what we'll see them in flight to make sure that they're capable of more than the bare minimum to get us to the Kármán line. And then finally, we will do some acceptance testing for TXE2, for example, a new finalized version of that engine. We will test it not too far above its expected needs, just to make sure it's kind of calibrated to what we want it to do on the vehicle. Finally, sometime by the end of 2022, we should have a fully integrated rocket that's ready for integrated stage testing, where we stand the entire vehicle upright with all of its systems inside of it and fire it for our full duration to see how things will work. There are some smaller tests leading up to that, but the exciting one is the full duration fire, which is why I mentioned it. Then finally, we'll launch. That's currently TBD because as students and as engineers, period, we recognize that not all of this is going to go according to plan. I know that between accept testing and stage testing, we're going to find something that we need to stop and fix, but we need to do it now instead of on the launch pad. We do, though, have a scheduler that's building out the schedule for us to pick an ideal launch date based on where we are right now. So that's TBD, likely by the end of this week or month.
So Lauren just spoke about our current project, Halcya, that we're working on, and I'll just go back to speaking about the vision for the future of TREL. So firstly, a point that Greg made earlier was about students failing in the lab. And this is something that we promote. We want our students to come up with their own ideas, test them, and fail, because this allows them to learn and grow and develop, and then take those lessons that they learned once they graduate from TREL and use them in whatever job they may go into, or even if they're able to learn quickly, apply that still while they're in TREL. Next, we're fostering tomorrow's leaders. As you can imagine, working on complex, intricate projects such as rocket engineering requires coordination, communication, and discipline, as each student in the lab is responsible for every job that they're assigned. And so we're inspiring our members to become their own leaders and take these leadership qualities and skills with them outside the lab once they are able to get into the professional world. And finally, we're shifting the paradigm of collegiate rocketry. We're demystifying the intricacies of rocket science and rocket engineering, and we're inspiring the younger generation of aerospace pioneers. And we want everyone who is interested in space, no matter where they come from or what they're capable of doing, to join us in our mission of exploring space one step at a time.
So with that, I would like to thank AWS so much for having us out today. I would also like to just show you some of our partners. So Firefly, for example, they constantly are able to give us access to a lot of their test sites and test facilities, which is awesome. That's where you saw our hot fire and a lot of our other major projects. EOS has been able to help us with our creation of our Havoc engine that we're currently working on, and I with their software enabling our rocket just to communicate with itself. But like we said earlier, it's not all on the engineering side. We also work with companies such as Procurify to make sure that our financing, our budgeting, our procurement system, that they all run in place. That way our engineers have the projects they need, but we also know that we're on our budget and we're meeting our quota as we look for everything else. So with that being said, I'd like to wrap our presentation up before we get into questions and tell you that if you're interested in following the lab's project, on the left, you can see our Gmail, our Instagram, our Twitter, and we'd love for you guys to track us, see how we're doing. And if you guys have any questions, want to talk more about TREL, if you would like to talk about potentially working with TREL in any manner, we would love to talk with you, and our contacts are here on the right, and you can shoot us an email and we'll respond to you within a day or two. I can't even say how excited we are about this and the developments we've recently made.
Great. Well, Adam, Greg, and Lauren, that is a great overview. I'm really impressed by the comprehensiveness of what you've talked about. You know, a rocket engine built in-house with additive manufacturing, hot fire testing to a representative engine, all the computer infrastructure and mission control platforms. You've basically covered just about everything in terms of an entire program. The fail fast approach is also interesting. I mean, that's implemented in other parts of this industry now, and that's really how they're really pushing the technology to the limits and coming up with this new space concept. Lauren, you already talked about a little bit about the schedule. I think this kind of follows a semester by semester basis. In the near term, what are your current overarching goals coming within this semester? Is it the flight weight testing that you mentioned, or can you expand on that? Just kind of a near term objective.
Yes. So our biggest, if I had to put it into a sentence, it's kind of like you mentioned, fail early and often. And what that means for us is getting to hardware, getting every system, really regardless of how ready they feel right now, to say, have you designed your part to meet your requirements? The answer is yes, because that's how you built your design to begin with. And we're like, awesome, let's go get it made and let's get it in our hands, because what we've learned is hardware is pretty brutally honest. It will tell you where you fell short. It will tell you what you don't know. And rather than getting caught in this analysis paralysis, which is something TREL, especially over COVID, was really prone to, it'll say, let's just try it. And, let's try these different configurations and see what works best. Let's get us to something that works rather than, the perfect rocket engine. We can make it perfect later. We first just need something functional. So that's really our big push. Get to hardware and let it fail. And as long as we're failing forward, we're gaining something out of doing that, and we're expediting our timeline.
Great. Pretty impressive list of companies. AWS, I'm proud to say, is one of them, but you've also got a number of other notable companies there. What is there any other type of company you're looking to partner with beyond kind of something that's maybe you want to reach out or to other parts of industry that might be of help filling a gap?
Yeah. So we partner with anyone that's interested in working with us and that we have kind of aligned values and missions with. So whether it's big industry leaders, like we're fortunate to have already partnered with some like AWS, EOS, Blue Origin, those big companies are able to give us guidance and mentorship while we're working on this project. We're able to work with them and understand from what they're doing what we can do better or what we're doing wrong. And things like that. But then also, as Greg mentioned, we've got partnerships with startup companies such as Procurify that runs our entire procurement system. So really, we're looking for companies that can offer us guidance and mentorship, but also someone that is willing to have a mutually beneficial relationship with us. Whether it's a startup company that's still testing their product and want to use TREL as kind of the guinea pigs for that. Or as I said, the industry leaders that want to provide guidance or sponsorships and donations of hardware like NI and EOS are doing. There's kind of different reasons for partnering with different companies. So for experience and mentorship, we would like to partner with the leaders in the aerospace industry. But because TREL is such a learning organization, we like to partner with these startup companies that we can work together with. We consider ourselves sort of a small aerospace startup company, as you can tell by all the different positions and operations of the lab. We run sort of like a company, and that's why we would like to work with smaller companies too. So we're both getting something out of it and learning from that experience.
Great. How does one reach out to you? Is it through your website or what's the best way to
so
reach out?
we have all our social medias, and then on the slide, I don't know if anyone got that, our emails were up there, but yes, we've got on the website, there is all our contact information. Our LinkedIn is there, all our social media accounts are there, but yeah, any way it's possible to reach us.
Great. So we've got three of you here. I get the impression there's a much larger group behind you, and I'd like to know, kind of get an idea of how many there are, and is there a common thread of what brings people to this project? What inspires people to get engaged? Maybe you can tell your own personal story, but do you feel like there's a common thread of what gets people excited, what gets people engaged? Are you turning people away, or are you, or is it just a growing team? Just give me an idea of that dynamic and how that works.
So I can speak on this a little bit. So we actively recruit every fall and spring. It's always very competitive. We're always accepting some and rejecting others just based off of what positions we need to fill. We're currently 232 strong in TREL, so we're a pretty big organization. We come from 24 different majors and all colleges of UT. And I would say the main thing that really brings us all together is our values, but also rocket science is so interesting. And a lot of the times, especially on the business team, what I've seen is someone will want to go out and maybe they wanted to be a rocket scientist when they grew up, but then they decided they wanted to do business later on, but they still wanted to learn about that and they wanted to get access to that. And that's what I think's awesome about TREL, is we're able to give not only the aerospace engineers, but also the non-aerospace engineers access to that, to be able to learn about rockets in general and really work on a project and say, I worked on a rocket. And I feel like that's something that just you can't even quantify, in my opinion.
Great. So a question from the audience came in regards to, if I can find it here, I apologize. I got that stand by here. It's, I'd like to hear just from each one of you, I could hear a personal story. I mean, you say you recruit and there's folks that come in. You all have a personal story of how you got engaged and how long you've been engaged. What I see Lauren smiling there. Is how did you connect with this? Was it I'd like to hear your personal story.
So my background in how I kind of landed here is pretty unique. So when I came to UT, I was an aerospace engineering major, but I quickly discovered space policy, and I was really excited about space policy. It was at that point I decided I'm getting my aerospace engineering degree to have that foundation, but when I graduate, I'm going to law school. So when I joined TREL, it was because our business director at the time shared a similar passion as me, and I wanted to kind of work closely with him and try and have, an impact in UT's space policy programs and the way that they approach it. And I felt like TREL was a good way to do that and start kind of pioneering that effort at the university. So I started on the outreach team. I loved outreach. I still try and engage. I think K through 12 STEM education is more important than it often gets credit for. And after that, like through the outreach team, I started engaging with the propulsion team. And at that point, I didn't really consider myself an engineer. I was here to get my bachelor's, but I wasn't here to ever get an internship in industry or anything. But then I fell in love with propulsion. I started doing more technical work with them, and eventually they had a leadership opening, and I applied, and I got the position. So a girl at that point who had no idea how a rocket engine even worked was suddenly the lead of 2 rocket engine projects being developed in conjunction with each other. So I got really involved in the TXE-1 assembly and test campaign, and I learned so much. And I think my answer to the question of what inspired me to pursue engineering as a career is TREL, because TREL taught me that it's okay to not know, one, which I think is a lot of what I was afraid of as an engineering major, was not knowing anything and feeling behind. And 2, just how complex these systems are. What I really love about Halcyon is the challenge in all of our technologies, and that we don't know how to do any of it. I really love that kind of challenge, and that's what really taught me that I want to be an aerospace engineer. And then I transitioned into the chief engineer role, which learning one subsystem was hard, and then I had to start learning 9 others. But just every day is the most incredible learning experience and opportunity to work with some phenomenal engineers and creatives and business people in our lab. And that's kind of how I am here. It's been just such a great experience.
Great, Lauren. I'll bet it is. Adam or Greg, do you have anything to add from a personal note, just to maybe give your perspective?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, you can go, Adam.
I can talk a little bit about it. Also, especially being from South Africa, it was a little more complicated on actually being approved to be in the lab. But as I mentioned, I'm a math major, so also not really in aerospace. And as Lauren mentioned, I was one of the people who came in not knowing much. But I joined the business team because I've got some experience in business, and it's one of my passions. And I actually got introduced to TREL through a friend of mine who was also on the corporate development team. And one day I was just talking to him about it, and he mentioned he was in this rocket lab at UT and they were building this rocket. And he kind of told me about the mission, and I said, wait, how are you just going to bring that up so casually and not tell me every single detail about what you're doing? So I started speaking to him and got to know more about it. And after like a week of speaking to him about it, I said, hey, how do I get involved? Please interview me now. And so, yeah, that's essentially how I got involved, and I joined the business team, and I was able to start working on things slowly. And yeah, it was just, it's about TREL is all about the inclusion, and anyone who shows interest and wants to be a part of it is able to be. And it's what Lauren said. It's not about not knowing things, because even if you don't know anything, your interest and your excitement will guide you into learning everything you need to know. And that's what it was for me. It was my excitement on being able to work on a project as exciting as Halcyon and TREL that allowed me to be where we are today, honestly.
Great. Greg, did you have a quick one there to add on? And I've got a few other questions.
I can do a real quick one. For me, I got in and I knew I wanted to do engineering, but I wanted to end up getting on the business side eventually. So I actually just saw a flyer on a wall and I just went to the info session. And I applied my freshman year, both times, spring and fall, and didn't get in. I'm not mad about that now. My sophomore year was finally my time. And so I got into the lab my sophomore year. And I remember sitting in the info session and our current business director walked up and told me what they did on the corporate development team. And I was just like, that's it for me. Like, that was the time where I was like, I get to work with the engineers, but still get to do all of the business. And that was something that for me, I thought was just invaluable. And I really wanted to get involved in.
Fantastic. Another question I think there's folks wanting maybe Phil a question in regards to your launch facility. I know there was a TBD on the launch, but where do you expect the launch site to be? Do you have candidates? Do you have something specific?
We have some candidates. So I saw one of the comments asking about the Base 11 Space Challenge. TREL was founded on $1 million anonymous donation that asked that we competed in the Base 11 Space Challenge. Because of COVID and because of many organizations not meeting a final deadline, where the Base 11 Space Challenge is right now is a bit up in the air. So whether or not they're providing us a launch site, that sort of thing. So TREL and other organizations, we kind of work together and talk about what we're doing, which I really appreciate, like that camaraderie across different rocket labs. Have decided to independently start looking into launch sites. So our two candidates are still Spaceport America out in New Mexico. That was originally our Base 11 launch site. So we are continuing to look down that path. And then Friends of Amateur Rocketry so far out in California are our two big candidates. We've been talking with both. We've been talking with the FAA to make sure all of our kind of approvals and meeting guidelines are in order. And we'll go about selecting one just through these conversations. I think we have a meeting with the FAA next week that should really help us kind of inform that decision. And Base 11 is making a big announcement about the status of the program, where the rewards at, that kind of thing today, actually. So I'll be in that conference later today.
Great. That's an important part of FAA licensing. It's definitely a challenge for any launch company. So I'm sure you're learning a very practical lesson in how that the challenge is there. So good luck with that. What the rocket has it been built from scratch, or how much of it is built in house? I know you said the engines. I saw some compute hardware. How talk about how much the is built in house and how much is is bought from other providers.
Outsourced. So I will say all of our skirts and inner tanks are made in-house by us. That's been a huge learning curve, kind of like I was talking about earlier. So we use like a foam sandwich carbon composite situation that involves forming the foam right, having our tool all right, a lot of just attention to detail and getting those done. So that's our big in-house effort. Things that we outsource, so our COPVs, they have an aluminum liner that we get made by a company called Samtech. And then I know that question had a tacked on kind of industry support thing. We get them wound at Firefly. And yeah, those get wound at Firefly, so those can be considered out of house, but we are very involved in the winding process and setting up that code and stuff. Yes, the engine chamber is made at EOS, and then our nozzle, we've designed, it's a custom purchase nozzle extrusion. So most of our components, I will say, are custom designed, and then we outsource to machine shops, with the exception of valves and sensors. Everything is designed by us, and then whatever we can't build in-house with either the machines or the materials that we have on hand, we'll outsource to a machine shop or someone of the likes to get it made. All of our like software testing hardware and like flight computers and like test data acquisition systems and stuff, a lot of those came from NI and a donation. So yeah, those are our big groups.
Great.
And then I'll just add on to the industry support. That is one of the main ways that TREL is able to function, as Lauren mentioned. We started with $1 million anonymous donation through Firefly that encouraged us to participate in the Base 11 Space Challenge, and now we encourage anyone who wants to be a part of TREL and get involved in our mission. We've got different sponsorship tiers that obviously come with different benefits, and so anyone who is interested in partnering with TREL or being a sponsor or anything like that, my email is on the bottom of the screen. So please feel free to reach out. We can have a conversation, talk about anything that you would like. But yeah, we do rely on industry support to make sure that the mission of TREL is completed.
Great. Well, I know you're still students and you're learning a lot there, but what do you plan on doing when you graduate?
I can start. So my plan's a little bit elaborate, but I do plan on going straight into industry, hopefully to work as a test engineer in new space, likely propulsion. That's kind of where I found my niche. And then eventually grad school, likely for a master's degree in propulsion, and to continue down that track. I would like big dream goals. Definitely, I'd love to be CTO or chief engineer at a new space startup one day.
Right.
For me, it would definitely be venture capital. That's what I've got experience in so far throughout college. Working on the corporate development team has allowed me to get more experience in that, and working with partners and sponsors and doing all that sort of outreach and investor relations. It's something that I've become very passionate about, even though it's not particularly what I'm studying or majoring in. I'm planning on using my educational background in math with computer science and computer engineering to kind of hopefully give me an edge going into venture capital to be able to work on the product side with that, and then my experience in the business side.
And Greg?
Yes, I'll go next. So I am planning on getting my hands into probably the aerospace industry for a little bit, and then I plan on going back and getting an MBA, and then getting into the business side of hopefully the aerospace industry, and really develop from there. I'm sorry, my Wi-Fi has been bugging out right now.
Yeah, we saw you come and go there. Well, that brings us up to time here, guys and girl. We're very pleased to be part of your team at AWS. We're wishing you great luck in this, and I'll be following along closely, and I hope to meet you guys in the near future. Best of luck, and I didn't know if there was any other questions that we had, but I think we're about there, unless you guys have any closing comments real quick.
No, I'd just like to thank AWS. Thank you to everyone who attended and came to watch us and listen to what we do at TREL. This has been amazing, great opportunity for us, especially as students, to have this opportunity to speak about what we're doing. So yeah, just thank you to everyone who's been involved in putting this on today, and especially a big thank you to the team at TREL for their hard work and everything they're doing here on campus and around in all our facilities.
Thank you very much. I guess we'll if we've got Jorge or Rich, if you're on deck, we're ready to bring it back over to you. This is a great talk, super interesting, and thanks for letting me moderate. Fantastic.
Well, thank you, Daryl. Thank you for participating in this. And I can tell you one thing, Jorge, just judging on what I heard from some young entrepreneurs in training here, we're in good hands if we keep bringing on that kind of talent and that kind of dedication.
Hey, so I wanted to that last session was pretty remarkable, like we had talked before. And I think we're about to jump in another really remarkable session. It's how to build a space business. My gosh. So that's kind of big topic, right? If you're wanting to get into space commercialization, you definitely want to hear for our next guests, Will Edwards and Brian Chambers. But before we jump into that, let's just do a quick review of our sponsor's video from AWS. Over to Erica. Man, that's actually a really awesome video there, Rich. I mean, AWS is everywhere. I'm looking at, just seeing how, just on the government side, what remarkable work you guys have been doing in space, but with our DoD, education, nonprofits, small business startups. You guys help enable so many things. So glad that you are in an ecosystem, and just the capability you guys do for our nation is really incredible. So that's pretty inspiring. Awesome. Just had to say that.
Yeah, and I think that video is so relevant because where the defense industry is today, starting with us about 10 years ago and driving into this, is where the space industry, needs to get to. And the space industry is beginning to realize that there's so much more out there in this dual-use, multi-use technology world that, hey, I built a new wearable. Well, guess what? Astronauts need a new wearable.
That's right.
I built a technology for tracking moisture in the ground. Well, the agricultural technology, there's a whole bunch of space and things you can do that out of space systems coming into it. So this whole idea that space is more than what you think of traditionally of rockets and launching, there is so much that's data-driven. There's so much that's sensor-driven. There's so many different opportunities for you to do a business that can operate in the space domain, not just today, but moving into the future as more satellites get launched, as Kuiper and Starlink and everything else go up in there, and it transforms the way we think about space. Space is going to become like the cell phones, right? It's going to become ubiquitous. There are space assets available for anybody, anytime, anywhere.
Yeah, no, I love that. And you're absolutely right. I mean, this landscape is limitless, really. Everything that you do day to day here on Earth is something that can apply to something that's needed in space, especially when we're now entertaining ideas of maybe habitating the moon and going to Mars. Man, those things that we do each and every day, you have to start thinking about how do you translate the capability that enables us as human beings here on this beautiful Earth in environments outside, like in space orbit, up in the lunar habitats, and up in Mars habitats when we start building that out. So really super remarkable. I'm really excited because as we now begin, we're gonna look at how to build a space business. And this one is actually pretty cool because you're gonna moderate. So I wanted to introduce you to moderate that. And you're gonna also introduce some really, two really extraordinary gentlemen, one from Capital Factory in looking at how, investment looks into space and what we're doing today to really grow that. And then Will Edwards, most importantly from Firehawk, and maybe talk a little bit about his experience in building a space business and how quickly he moved from conception to idea. So really excited about this. Everybody on the audience, this is going to be a great 45 minutes. So Rich, I'm going to go ahead and just move the mic over to you to give you that formal introduction for those guys, and looking forward to hear what comes out of this session. This is going to be super exciting.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot. And I look forward to bringing up Brian Chambers and Will from Firehawk to kind of talk through this. When we first discussed doing a panel around investors and startups in the space business, we were originally thinking about a panel with investors and a panel with startups going into it. But the idea of doing a panel with both sides sharing their perspectives of what it's like to look for a startup to invest in and what it's like to be a startup looking for investors really appealed to me. So great to have you guys here. Really excited to do this panel here. First things first, can you give us a little bit about yourself and specifically how you got started in the whole entrepreneurial world, space or non-space? Were you prepared for the reality you faced? What surprised you the most? And what one thing, if you could go back in time and tell yourself, hey, younger me, guess what? You need to know this. And first, I'd love to throw it over to Will Edwards from Firehawk, the only person I know who walks around with rocket fuel under his arm.
Thank you, Rich. I appreciate you guys having me here today. Yeah, my name's Will Edwards. I'm the CEO at Firehawk Aerospace. What we do is we build high-performance hybrid rocket engines that's powered by our proprietary 3D printed rocket fuel. My co-founder decided that there needed to be a new way to produce rocket propellant. We needed to make rocket engines safer, more cost-effective, and he thought that by using additive manufacturing, you can actually do so. So this is our 3D printed rocket fuel right behind me. And gosh, yeah, getting started in the startup world and in the space world, it really started when I was in high school. I was walking through my library and I walked by Forbes' first edition of 30 Under 30. And I went through this magazine. I saw all of these people working on incredible projects. And I thought I wanted to make a career out of this and find something that I could be passionate about and build it from the ground up. So I worked through college on ideas. I actually had a software company that after college, I was able to turn into a business in Los Angeles and then joined Firehawk. And what I think surprised me the most for this reality was to expect anything. And if you do that, then you really can't be that blindsided. We are in a field where chaos is just the norm. And if you expect the unexpected, then that's the best preparation you can have for that. What surprised me the most was the friends I've made. A lot of founders tell this story that you build bonds with other founders, which is true. We have good and bad things happen to us every single day. And I can't tell you how many times I had either a friend in my office who was facing a problem that I faced, a year earlier, or I had the same issue with him, or vice versa. And we really bonded over that. And if you just put yourself out there, the friendships you can make in the startup world, they're just extraordinary. Yeah. I'm blanking on that third point you were asking about.
So if you go back in time and kind of tell yourself, hey, be prepared, you need to know this.
Gotcha. Yeah, I had a founder of a very successful company tell me early on when I started this I was 22 when I left law school to join the startup world. He said, live in the middle. And what he means by that is never let your highs be too high or your lows be too low, because a lot of good things and a lot of bad things are going to occur. And the only way you can successfully operate through them consistently is to just not let them bother you and live in the middle. And I think about that just about every single day.
That's awesome. And that is so true. Even when you're on my side of the fence and you're in a huge corporation working with startups, we face the same kind of challenges. They're just at different scales, right? So, well, Brian, I'd like to ask you kind of the same thing, but could you also give us a little bit more about what you do at the Capital Factory?
Yeah, thanks so much, Rich. Always enjoy hanging out with you. Will and I have been hanging out a lot together lately, talking about geeking out about space and all sorts of cool stuff. So great to be here with y'all. Again, my name is Brian Chambers. I'm our Vice President of Ventures at Capital Factory. I've had a really interesting relationship with Capital Factory over the last 5+ years, including being a portfolio, being a founder of a company that was a portfolio of the Capital Factory Investment Fund. And we ended up exiting that business. And then I joined the team full-time at Capital Factory. So as the Vice President of Ventures, I manage our venture team, which is really spread out across the state of Texas. And everything that we do, our whole team is just relentlessly passionate and focused on helping founders in the Capital Factory portfolio succeed by introducing them and helping them get connected to investors, helping them raise their rounds, get ready for their rounds, connect with mentors, solve specific problems, find the talent that they need. I always say that there's, the 3 universal truths of every startup. Every startup needs money, they need customers, they need talent. And that's an impossible balance, by the way, always in every single startup. And you have to relentlessly pursue all the above all the time. And so we build strategies and have team members that help founders pursue all of the above all the time. And lastly, I say there's a silent fourth as well. And that's what's keeping you awake at night this month or this quarter. There's usually a very specific problem that a founder can tell you, I happen to have right now in 1 week or 1 month, it's an intellectual property problem. And the next month, it's a user design and experience problem or a cybersecurity problem or whatever it may be. And they might not need to hire somebody full time, but they might need a world-renowned expert to come in, coach them up, consult with them, help orient them, confirm critical decisions about their strategy. And we call that mentoring at Capital Factory. And we're truly supported by an incredible group of mentors, people who have been there and done it and built incredible businesses and scaled them and can lend a lot of that expertise to founders. So that's what I do at Capital Factory. We have an investment fund, of course, now investing out of the Texas fund. And space is really at the top of our minds. We've been getting more active in it. It's something I've been passionate about for as long as I can remember. And it's a bucket list item of mine. I'm sure like many people tuning in today and around the industry is to go to space one day. So I'm hopeful to be able to achieve that. About how
a rocket that Will powers.
Yeah.
One day.
Yeah, we're getting there. How I got into the space and became really an entrepreneur was I remember a critical moment when I was 15 years old and I started my first business. It didn't feel like I was starting a business. I happened to have a skill. It was in demand. I built a water sports business around that. And it taught me a lot about building a business. I ended up having employees and organized employees that worked for me. I built strategic partnerships with all these local boat shops and ended up running that. I made barely enough money to live, but one of the things that it did is it allowed me and put me in a position to take more risk and to be more comfortable taking risk because I knew I had the skill and I knew I had an opportunity that I could fall back on. And so, and I like to think in my past that was a bit of an unfair advantage that encouraged me to take more risk. So I naturally just started taking risk and starting businesses. Many of those went on to fail. I began investing in some businesses, and those are all very risky things to do when you're after college. And so, but that's how I've spent my whole career, is doing very entrepreneurial things now, more so through the lens of an investor and wearing an investor hat. You mentioned a couple of other questions, so let me just touch on those real quickly. That's how I got in and became an entrepreneur. One of the things that surprised me most is really how difficult this really is, how stressful it is. I kudos to Will for staying in the middle. It's hard. It's very hard to stay in the middle. More of an ideal than maybe an actuality. Emotions are high when you're a founder. It's incredibly stressful. And how difficult it actually is something that surprises me. That being said, when you raise money and you raise venture capital, which largely, every space-related business does. So, investment is a key part of the formula if you're building a space business. The cliff is really steep, and how fast. What surprised me is how fast you can fall off that cliff when you're building a business if you don't have, the proper runway or the proper support around the organization. And so that's something that, founders are always keeping in mind, what their runway is and how much runway they have and how steep that cliff is. And investors are telling you to go uncomfortably fast. And that's a really, really difficult thing to manage. And so I just, I can recall to those moments and how difficult some of that planning becomes when you're a founder and a venture-backed founder with the pressure to build and grow incredibly fast. And some of the advice I would go back and I would give myself is really to prepare for the winning outcomes. This also makes the cliff extra steep, but I regret forming an LLC when I started my business. Today I sit in that position and I recognize that, frequently founders that do that aren't ready for, they're not acting on what they believe is the big outcome. And frequently responses, well, we're ready to convert and we're going to convert into a corporation when we need to. And I can tell you, investors, that's a non-starter for lots of different VC firms, if not almost all of them. So don't act like that. Act like what you want to be, what you need to be. That's just one example. And so I remember I ended up doing that with my last business. We ended up getting acquired as an LLC before we ended up converting. But that's a non-starter for a lot of people. Funds can't take equity in a lot of LLCs. And so you're going to really immediately limit and narrow the field for what's possible if you do some of those things. So, good counsel and a good network of experienced entrepreneurs, founders, mentors around you is just so invaluable. Frequently, people don't know that they need that until they need it sometimes, and that's a little too late. So, that's the advice I would give myself. We were lucky enough to be immersed in the Capital Factory network, and it was the X factor for us back then.
Yeah, I'm always telling people and always pushing on networking. But both of you touched on something. Entrepreneurs talk to other entrepreneurs, right? They're willing to share lessons with it. Talk to them, ask them. Somebody has seen what you've seen before. Nobody understands an event horizon like an entrepreneur who's looked at, oh, my runway is gone, right? You understand it at a cellular level of what's going on in that life. So there is so much that you can do by tapping into these communities and finding folks. And it's amazing, people you think, oh, he'd never talk to me. He's got this great, big, successful company now. No, they'll be willing to talk to you. Reach out, ping them, see if you can get them to talk to them.
And I'd like to add the LLC is a perfect example. My first company was an LLC. And then we got to the point where it was going to be venture backed. And we went through a pretty painful process of converting it with limited dollars at the time before they would invest. So that's one of the things you learn by being around people like Brian and Capital Factory and other founders.
Yeah, that really leads into my next question because, Brian, you set us up well. I want to talk about that wonderful point in life of a startup when you say, I need to raise my initial funds, right? The thing I probably get asked most often when I'm talking with companies and working through this is, how do I know when I'm ready to raise funding? How do I make that determination that it's time for me to go make that consideration and go out to do it? What advice would you share with them? Understanding not to be in an LLC or the risks of an LLC is important. How does a startup founder know that I'm ready to go out and raise that funding?
Well, for first-time founders, probably very different than a second or third or serial founder. So maybe I'll speak to that being a first-time founder, but usually that experience lends itself, and it's frequently binary. If you're building a space business, you need to raise money. If you're building a space business, it's a little bit different if you're building a software business, and you don't have the CapEx requirements of testing, serious propulsion systems, and so. Proper planning. Look, I think setting key milestones, working to achieve those milestones and doing everything you can to validate that there is the problem, to show earliest signs of product market fit and that you've done everything you can to go as far as you can to de-risk it before you ask for somebody else's money. These are important things for investors to know, and to find alignment with investors, that you've done everything you can, that you were invested in this process, just like you're asking to an investor to take substantial risk. Have you taken substantial risk as well? So investor alignment is important, and doing everything that you can, including finding tips and tricks and hacks to just validate this is a problem that needs to be solved, and there is evidence of product market fit, or heck, we've even achieved some of the earliest signs of product market fit. Being able to so I think those are the requirements. It's like I said, in space, it's probably a little bit more binary. I don't think many folks start a space business without the intentions to be venture backed, just because of the requirements are so intense. The CapEx requirements are intense. It's incredibly complex. The talent required to build space businesses is incredibly expensive, and hard to find, and limited per se. And hopefully that pool is growing substantially. We know it is. So I think those are some of the things on the forefront of every founder's mind that are operating in the sector. But it's probably pretty well known when you're in the space sector, you got to raise some money to build to accomplish the big outcomes that you want.
So Will, coming at it kind of from the other side, how did you figure out that you were ready to begin that first foray into raising funds? Were you right when you made that determination? If you were, what were those things that told you, hey, those were good signs for me to look at?
Yeah. So we were unique when we raised our first round of funding. We had issued patents already. I had known the inventor of our technology for 20 years now. So I'd known what he had been working on when he was ready to go to market. But we had done a significant amount of diligence into the technology. We had white papers, documentations, and IP. And IP is incredibly important in the space industry because it's something tangible that you can call your own before you are launching vehicles into space or other systems within Earth's orbit. And, by the time we chose to raise money, we were doing a good job of spending our savings, made significant traction. We found interest in space, defense, as well as our partner industries, additive manufacturing. We found people who were very well known in that industry who wanted to work with us. It was November, I believe, of 2019 when I went down to Houston for SpaceCom, and we were named crowd favorite at SpaceCom. And there were a lot of significant companies in the crowd who voted for us. And we saw all of this combined, the traction, the IP, and the partnerships, as well as SpaceCom, as this is the right time to go raise a round of funding, which was necessary because look at the students that you all just spoke to from UT. I mean, they are high caliber students who are going to go out there, be very successful, and command very strong salaries. So we have to have the capital to be able to employ these very smart engineers. And then we have to buy all the materials. We have to be 3D printing our fuel grains. We have to have a facility, have to have a test stand. So to really make a mark and not just be putting things on paper, but actually do it, we had to raise money. And if we wanted to be for real, we had to raise money, and it was the right time to do so.
So Brian, you've been working in the investment world for a while, but in particular, you've been doing a lot of mentoring at the Capital Factory and other places. What do you look for in an early stage company? Let's call it in the pre-seed, initial seed round going into it. Clearly, the product has to be there. Even if it's just an idea, it has to be a well-described and defined idea. You maybe are raising money to implement that idea. But what are you looking for in the company? What are you looking for in the founders? Is there a market signs that you're looking at that you can advise them on?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. And I think this is probably universally true for whether you're building a space business or any business. But fundamentally, what problem are you solving? Is there a clear problem versus looking for a problem to solve? And I think that's fundamentally very, very important. And founders need to be very in tune with the nature of the problem that they're solving. I think, especially if for those that desire to raise money, venture capital, you've got to have a monster market opportunity. If that market opportunity is $1 billion market opportunity, that's a non-starter for most VC funds. It's got to be significantly larger than that, and so the scope of the problem really has to be significant. And so the market opportunity has to be massive. Team matters a lot. The people who you invest in are the foundation of the business. So I think that how qualified is the team? You ask the question: are they the very best and the most capable in the world at their craft? And do they obsess over this particular problem? Do they not just spend a lot of time thinking about it? Do they obsess about it? I think that's a critical thing. I think investors look for as well. One of my favorite questions I like to ask somebody that's getting ready to raise money: what's your unfair competitive advantage? If anybody with a budget can go compete with you, that doesn't seem like you're really set up to win. What is your unfair competitive advantage? Why are you going to win over anybody else who might have $5 million in the bank account? Like, why are you going to beat them? And I really look for quality answers with regard there. Those, that has a lot to do with, people who are, incredibly world-renowned in their field or have a superpower in a particular sector. And then lastly, there's lots of different sizes and stages of funds, but you have to have alignment with a subset of a fund or a series of funds. There has to be investment economics that can be justified by the fund. And for example, and I'll just point out, we write really small checks at Capital Factory, but we write a lot of them. We don't have to make investments that necessarily return the whole fund from a single portfolio company. We love that. Those really, really excite us. And better yet, when we do it, we really pump our fists in the air. But that's not a requirement, because our funds will have, such a large amount of portfolio companies, and it's so diversified. That happens to be our strategy. But when you look at a Series B fund or a Series A fund that's only going to hold 10 investments, and it might be a $200 million fund or a $300 million fund, every single investment that they make must be able to return the whole fund. And so you have to understand the financial economics with regard to the opportunity. And then the last thing I guess I would say is, are the terms market competitive? Do founders really understand what terms are? I teach a venture capital class at UT Dallas, and I frequently, when I relate to students, it's akin to, hey, you're walking into a neighborhood, everyone's got a home in this neighborhood. All things are generally comparable. There might be some nuances, but if the average home trades for $350 a square foot and you walk into a home that's $1,000 a square foot, you are not buying that home. And so is the opportunity and the expectations of the founders, the price that they expect to sell equity for, is it market competitive such that the economics can be justified? So a lot of these stars have to align, but those are some of the things I think are at the forefront of not just our minds, but almost all investors.
So Will, an often overlooked but critical part for a founder of this process is having to decide who to approach about investment. It's not a simple decision, and one you have to live with. You're entering into a familial relationship with an investor over time. And this drives success. If you don't have a good relationship with your investor, things are really going to get ugly fast. How did you determine kind of what you were looking for in a partner to engage with? Did you have any criteria? Was it just for funding, or were you looking for sweat equity or mentorship or access to market? What were you looking for in an investor before you made that plunge?
So, and that's a great question. We were very actively looking for two things from an investor: someone who could provide mentorship in a network, and then someone who could provide technical expertise, who could do diligence into our product that we could reuse. First getting started when you're raising that angel round or seed round of funding, and say, you're not coming out of MIT or Stanford or Y Combinator. You are calling everyone up. You're making as many phone calls as you can to introduce yourself to the world. I saw a LinkedIn post where someone had, for his seed round, he had something like 170 meetings, closed it, and it was 100% outbound what he closed, and it took him about 6 months to close a seed round. His Series A, he had 5 meetings, 100% inbound, and it took him 30 days to close. So that's because he probably got pretty lucky and had some really quality seed round investors. So I'm very lucky because we did the gambit. I had a lot of phone calls. I talked to a lot of people. I was a kid who was carrying around rocket fuel, a big chunk of plastic, and saying, "Hey, we 3D print rocket fuel. We want to disrupt how rocket engines are made." Big market opportunity, big industry, but also big competitors. So we had to find investors who are very passionate about that. We got the passionate investors who want to stick with us, who are here for the good and the bad. We also found the investors who did their technical diligence in us, a great firm out of Palo Alto. They did a lot of diligence and invested in us. And then, Capital Factory was an investor of ours as well. And they were pretty instrumental to our company coming to Texas and staking, our place in the ground here in the Dallas area. So through Capital Factory, we got the mentorship and the network throughout all of Texas to build our company. And so we got
Oh,
am I back?
You're back.
All right. What was the last thing you guys heard?
That your investment from the group in Palo Alto helped you with diligence.
Okay, so they helped us with diligence. Yeah, we got that. Then we got passionate investors who are sticking with us through the good and the bad, and we also got our network from Brian Chambers and Capital Factory. They played a huge role in getting us to Texas. Their mentorship, everything that Brian spoke about, is very true. I mean, I've gone to Austin several times now to meet with the whole team. The network they provided. And we are in the process of raising another round of funding. And I get to do my own personal due diligence on investors sometimes through Capital Factory. I just call them up and say, "Can I hear what your thoughts on this group? What should I expect?" And we were very fortunate to get a really good group of early investors, because you're right, they will make or break your company. So I'm just grateful for where we ended up.
So one of the absolute truisms about getting into the space market is you can't do it alone, right? You need partners, whether they're integrations and components that you use, or someone that's integrating you in as a component. They're suppliers, they're go-to-market specialists, the SMEs, the people who understand the legal and policy implications, all of those things that go on. Heck, even cloud partners. Picking the right partners, establishing those relationships, and working in close coordination with them is really critical. Are there any insights, Will, that you can provide on how you've gone about this? I mean, I know that from additive process and all the things that you plug into, and you're a key part in what someone's developing, but only a piece of it. How have you established those relationships, and how do you continue to find those relationships?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's absolutely true. You in the space and in defense industry, we are incredibly reliant on our partners. We have to have great partnerships with the people we do business with. And a lot of our business is additive manufacturing. We get our fuel grains 3D printed from different firms all around the country. And then there's a process that we do to our fuel grains even after they're printed. And then we have a test facility at NASA instead of Space Center. So we build a relationship with NASA. That's a great group. It's just incredibly important to find people who are very passionate in other industries that you get to work with, because that really allows you to innovate faster and move more quickly. None of us are at this alone. We're all connected and binded. And for space to become a really scalable economy, it has to become more horizontal. And that's one of the missions that I want to see this happen over the next 20 years, to see a very horizontal economy closer to the aerospace industry. And then AWS, we do extensive software writing actually at our firm. We have to have something that takes the data from our engine tests and quickly turns it into something that's readable, that we can display and share with people. And AWS has done, we use them, and we're benefited from doing some of your startup programs. So it's critical for our success, and it's actually saved us a lot of money. So thank you for what you guys do over there.
Thank you for being on AWS.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Brian, we touched on this a little bit earlier, but just as important as picking the right partner, whether it's an investor or the partner you're working with, is protecting the long-term value and viability of the company, right? Working with a partner, if you lose your IP, is not a value proposition. It is a balancing act to leverage those partnerships in a way that helps you grow the business and it establishes that relationship, but still fits you as a company. And understanding that, look, a merger or acquisition is not a bad outcome, but it's not necessarily the outcome a company is looking for. Looking as an investor or a mentor, what would you look at as you're going through these partnerships and doing engagements with your customers and partners to ensure that you maintain that viability?
Brian, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Thanks. It's really hard to predict these outcomes, but I think at the end of the day, a business has got to have a path and a plan, and or a demonstrated team that's got the capability to grab significant market share in a giant market. I think there's lots of paths to, there's more paths to liquidity today than ever, whether companies will SPAC, whether they'll get acquired, whether they'll go, file an S1 and go public. Companies are really into the, tens of billions, if not hundreds of billions of dollars if they're filing S1s these days. But there are other modes and methods to do that. So I think, just having line of sight and having a viable path to achieving that market share is critical. That you don't get acquired unless you're grabbing that market share and you're reaching aggressive milestones, and the terminal growth of that business and the slope of the curve is up and to the right. And so, I think it's critical to be able to demonstrate that. And look, at the end of the day, funds have different strategies. If whether you're investing $1 billion or $500,000, there are very different outcomes that are totally acceptable and are huge wins for different funds. So I think where we play, which is really seed, Series A, acquisitions are frequently a big success for our portfolio companies, for our fund. And so, I think that there are players in the market that are going to be acquiring lots of space businesses, because they've got platform technologies and they're going to do what they look at as add-ons. And those add-ons in the space business are going to be billion-dollar add-ons because this is a big, big market and it's growing really fast.
Yeah. One of the things that I've been trying to stress at AWS, and we're talking about across this, is that space is more than you think it is, right? And by that, I mean very simply that there are more tech capabilities and scientific research that cross over to that. As I mentioned before, you can be wearables, you can be ag tech, you can be anything inside there. The defense community has done a really good job of getting people to think about dual use technologies, even though I hate that term because nobody wants two uses. You want multi-use technologies, but let's not go there. How do we bring that mindset to the space arena? And one of the questions we got from the audience, I think, fits very well into this. Can you think of some technologies that are viable now or coming to market in the short term, 6, 12, 18 months, that will start to lay the foundation for those plans to go to Mars, the moon, beyond low Earth orbit? Are you seeing kind of things out there that are laying those foundational capabilities?
Oh yeah, and I can point to 2 Texas-based companies. One of them also a portfolio company that we have in Austin, Texas. Icon, they 3D print homes. They've also won a contract. They're really, in the business of they're a material science company as well as a robotics company. Their robots are really big, almost the size of a small spaceship, and they build structures. And they won the contract to build the first structure on the moon. And so when I think about, that's just one example. And they've also, are also building the Mars habitat on Earth in preparation for building structures on Mars. This is happening really in the next couple of years. They've got their launch date to send their robot to the moon to do off-world construction. This is a whole new category in what I call the space investing stack. And so, but Rich, to your point, the space stack, as we'll call it, the space tech stack, it's really pretty big. And it takes, as Will pointed to earlier, this has got to become more integrated, more horizontal, another way to say it. And I think, whether that's hardware and transportation, that's a subsector, that's propulsion systems like Firehawk, that's, propulsion systems that can carry huge payloads like giant robots, things that can do vertical takeoff and landings on the moon, not just on Earth, but we've got to be able to land on the moon. That's a very specific and special type of technology to land on the moon and take off from the moon. That's very different than the Earth, given gravitational forces. So I think let's look at our friends down in Houston, Intuitive Machines. That's what they're building. They're headed to the moon. They're doing this next year. It is a literal and figurative moonshot. They are the first private company in the United States that's going to go land on the moon. And so there are companies that are doing this. This is very real, and it's happening. And the next 5 years are going to be super, super exciting. Rich, you touched on sensors and data and cybersecurity. That's a critical part of the space stack. The communications infrastructure that gets stood up. Off-world construction is probably one of my favorites, because when we start to think about excavating on the moon, structures on the moon, it gets really exciting. We can physically think about ourselves on that, celestial body. So I think that's a lot of fun. And then shortly behind that, we know the leisure, entertainment, hospitality markets, ancillary things like agriculture and space become really relevant.
So Will, taking it to the super practical, are there things that you could really use, companies that could come in and fill gaps and plug into programs that you're trying to work on and things you're trying to do? Are there gaps that you see that, gosh, I'd really love somebody if they had this for me?
Oh, now I get to call Will out for being on mute.
Dang it. Sorry. Anyways, Brian named one that I'm incredibly excited about, and that's Icon's ability or planned abilities to print and build on the surface of the moon as well as Mars. One of the unique things about our company is we'll be able to 3D print our rocket fuel using the minerals on the surface of the moon, the ice and the regolith, using the aluminum that's actually found on the surface. And to have companies like Icon be able to go there and create the structures around this process where we can safely excavate and print this fuel, saving billions of dollars in transportation costs, so you don't have to worry about lifting that fuel from Earth to the moon, we'll benefit greatly from that. That's our moonshot project. We're so excited to work on that down the road. And then there are just other great companies that are building gas stations in the moon, for in Earth orbit for satellites to refill up and extend their life. So there's a lot of things happening. But Icon and their structures on the lunar surface, I'm very excited about how we might use that down the road.
Well, guys, this has been great. We could go on multiple other topics here because there's so many interesting things that we can talk on here. But I'd like to kind of just throw back over to you. Is there any insights that you would like to share with the folks who are listening in?
Brian, you want to go first?
This is so important. Not only that, I think we've seen in 2020, this is the decade. 2020 is the decade of the next 8 years. This is the decade of space commercialization. There are more funds forming every day. There are more companies launching every day to solve critical and important problems in space. And I'm just so dang excited about it. It's going to be, it's going to be an incredible decade, and some opportunities are really are going to change humanity. It's happening now.
And then I'd just like to talk to everyone who's out there and interested in joining a startup or doing their own thing. Brian sort of made it over the finish line with exiting his, and now he's at that dream scenario where he gets to help cultivate other companies. But I just like to iterate that this is incredibly hard. There's so much that's going to go wrong while you try to build your company, but you can't let those bad situations stop you. Really, so long as you're just honest and upfront with everyone that's involved, your investors, your team, things have a way to work themselves out. And it's just an exciting ride. Enjoy it. And it's worth the risk. And it's just, like Brian said, this is going to be an exciting 10 years with lots of opportunities.
That's awesome. And I totally agree. I love seeing the guys that are taking that chance and giving a whack at it. You know what? It may not work out, but plan for success, drive to success. And if you take a different path while you're getting there, I like to say that my startup didn't fail. We just found something else to do.
That's right. I love that.
All right, gents. Well, thank you so much for joining me on this. I really look forward to continuing our conversations, especially Brian. I want to be able to carry that around with me to some of the meetings I have. I love the idea of taking the 3D fuel with me.
Yeah. We'll send you on.
Yeah. Thanks, Rich. Thanks, Will. Good to see y'all.
All right. So let's bring back up Jorge and let's close out this session. And it's been fantastic. I really want to thank Capital Factory for helping me connect with and bring in these incredible partners that we've discussed and talked with today. We really believe in the space domain. We really believe that this is exploding, and commercial space and government space are blending together to create the next space economy. So we are all in with this, and we're all in with partners like Capital Factory and with our partners across the state of Texas.
Well, and thank you so much, Rich, for just helping us as well, just being inclusive in this space economy ecosystem. I mean, today we went over just some remarkable things from women in space and the kind of remarkable things that they're doing. Met some really great pioneer women, right, that are actually moving the needle on a lot of different technologies. Also with the students at TREL. I mean, amazing. I mean, just to wrap that up, the amazing talent that's coming in and going into the startup community to create companies like what Will has, Firehawk. I mean, he's a very young man coming out of school, starting something that's going to change the game on propulsion in space from either rockets or even doing things up in orbit or on the moon. I mean, it's pretty remarkable where the future is going. So I'm really excited. I know just from the Capital Factory perspective, working with AWS and other people across the state of Texas, from academics to startups to government, we're really looking to build density around the space economy. So this has been just a remarkable few sessions we've had in this panel. So thank you so much, Rich, for your help and helping sponsor this track. I'd like to get everybody here online, though, before you run away, make sure that at 12:15, you come right back onto the same channel. We have our developer track happening right at 12:15. So that's just about 10 minutes away. And then also, do not forget, if you like
Don't forget our happy hour.
That's right. If you like this track, you're going to like our Space Happy Hour even better at, Central Machine Works at 5 p.m. today here in Austin. So please, if you haven't signed up for that, go ahead and register. And we are looking forward to seeing you there. So Rich, hoping to see you there, maybe grabbing a drink with you during Space Happy Hour.
Look forward to it, Jorge, and look forward to meeting all the folks here that want to stop by.
All right, awesome. Well, everybody, take care and see you at the developer track.